We're up to our first session. So as both Peter and I have said, the sessions are going to run as a panel discussion prompted by a video up front. So while we're seeing our first session, of course, from our most mature program, EverGraze, which everyone in the room is, I'm sure, well familiar with, while we're seeing the video of EverGraze, if our panellists could just go down the back and get mic'd up, and then they can come back up the front at the end, but try and catch the video if you haven't already seen it. And as for the rest of us, please sit back and enjoy the 7-odd minute video explaining EverGraze, its foundations and its success so far. Please join me in enjoying it.
Put in place a systems-focused and evidence-based model. It began with the targets and a set of principles. Put the right plant in the right place for the right purpose with the right management. In a research sense, it set out to achieve a significant increase in profitability while at the same time reducing recharge and improving ground cover, as well as improving the perenniality and biodiversity of farm systems. What we've been able to do is actually show those figures by collecting data on our research sites as well as on farm with case studies and demonstration sites. Farmers have actually shown us and collected that data so that we can quantify the impact of those making changes on farm.
EverGraze has increased our profit from a number of perspectives. One is we were continually spending money sowing pasture species, and with our rotational grazing and understanding a right plant in the right place has enabled us to maintain the deep-rooted perennials indefinitely. So that's saved an enormous amount of money each year in upgrading pastures. And our wool quality has improved enormously through the rotational grazing and the extended grass growing period, because we're managing this diverse suite of pasture species.
We live in a capitalist environment, so when farmers are making changes, and we're talking about the big changes in EverGraze, we're talking about large investments in pastures, changes in livestock enterprise mix, and these require significant capital outlays. So when we're providing information for farmers, we need clear, consistent messages. They have to be evidence-based to give the farmer what they need to know to make that change.
One of the things we need to continually do is strive for productivity growth. We've got to be growing and doing things more efficiently. Things like EverGraze provide us with the tools to improve our efficiencies to reduce our cost of production.
When farmers are considering change, they consider the cost and the impact in terms of both the profitability and the impact on their lifestyle and their whole farm business. But they also consider the risk. There's an increasing focus on risk and resilience as we live in a more volatile environment.
We've taken the soil from white beach sand, and the organic matter is built up in the soil, and particularly up near the surface. We've actually started to grow the soil. The biggest issues is wind erosion and water erosion. Wind erosion has been the biggest issue. This area here that we're standing in now is one of the last areas that we're having to try and stabilise. This one here suffers both wind erosion in the dry years and water erosion. The wind erosion just took all the topsoil away, and then you came in with heavy rain and it just scoured out the area. This area here was just a nightmare to come and look at. EverGraze principles, right plant, right place, right purpose, is so critical in your thinking. Think about the purpose of the plant in depth, the layers. Kikuyu for me is the foundation pasture. Then we build on that with legumes, first story, grasses, second story. So when the grasses senesce at the end of the year, your kikuyu is still there. It hasn't senesced and you've still got something on the ground covering it.
We've developed a succinct statement that we can back with evidence for 30 key messages across the project. And we've integrated these together so we can look across sites to previous research, to case studies, to back the evidence from the science with the full story. in terms of what is the profitability benefit of implementing these changes? What's the environmental benefit? What are the risk considerations that we need to take into account? And what's this going to mean to my farm system when I put it in place?
How we've adopted EverGraze principles is we run large mobs of sheep, so we haven't carved our paddocks up into smaller lots, so our paddocks still sit at sort of 30 or 40 hectares. So we run mobs of 2,500 sheep in one mob, and they move strategically around the pastures based on growth stage and dry matter available. For us, it has allowed us to run a higher stocking rate, so sort of greater production per hectare. It's allowed us to monitor feed available and plan our feed budgets going forward, and hopefully alert us to when we're coming to a squeeze or when the season doesn't look to be going in our favour earlier, and to plan for that. I also think that we've been able to maintain a more consistent feed profile. There's less sort of boom and bust and less finessing pasture, so there's the quality I think is more consistent.
On our website, we have what we call our body of evidence. That's the engine room. We have over 400 resources, and it includes the research that's backed with the evidence. That feeds up to products in terms of what we call our on-farm options on the website. These are the options that farmers have in a regionally relevant sense to make changes to their systems to address issues. And we've gone to great lengths to define what those issues actually are, so that a farmer can actually understand when they go to that website, not just what we found from the research, which is presented in a research paper, but what it actually means to them.
It's really simplified our management, it's simplified our stock work, it's enabled to watch our stock, manage their condition score, manage wool quality, manage our pasture base so much better than in the old days. We've been able to achieve some wonderful things with the support of the EverGraze ideals and principles and team, particularly that concept of seeking the evidence, convincing yourself and making the change.
We've achieved significant change and impact within the life of this project, and I think that's something really to be proud of. But what we've developed in the last couple of years in making these regional packages available to farmers in a way that can be built on in the future is something that's really exciting for Australian agriculture.
And now join me in welcoming to the stage the EverGraze All-Stars. First up, the program leader, Michael Friend from Charles Sturt University, and then Kate Sargent, who's been living and breathing until quite recently EverGraze for God knows how many years, the former project leader, now with Dairy NZ. That's not Meredith, that would be Morgan Soundness. I should have told you people what order to come on stage in. Morgan from Noellen, who we heard from earlier on the south coast of WA. Next to Morgan, we've got Chris Mirams from Albury, our farm consultant at EverGraze Champion. And finally, closest to me here, Meredith Mitchell, EverGraze researcher and CRC PhD graduate from the Department of Environment and Primary Industries Victoria. Please take a seat. You've worked hard for a number of years. Now, each of the sessions are going to work with me throwing a few questions to the panel, but making sure that we leave. So that'll go for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to leave 10 minutes at the end for your questions. So please have them ready, and we'll also be going to any tweeted or however else received questions along the way. But first up, I'd like to start with you, Michael. How important has it been for the EverGraze system to address the dual benefits that we've heard a bit of already this morning, profitability and NRM outcomes?
Yeah, look, it's been incredibly important, Bernie. I mean, I think historically we've tended to have researchers work in either the production camp or the environment camp. And when we were trying to solve the issues that EverGraze was addressing, it was really important that we work together. So, for example, in the video and in the previous videos, the issue of salinity was mentioned. So in the previous salinity CRC, when EverGraze was initially born, the challenge was in the high rainfall zone, how do we reduce groundwater recharge? And the answer to that was quite straightforward. We plant more perennials, but of course, The issue with that from a production point of view is that planting more perennials in that zone is costly, so it costs the farmer. So we needed to demonstrate an economic benefit by including perennials in that system. So that really resulted in the first phase of EverGraze, where we were investigating what mix of perennials across that farm might best achieve the recharge benefit, and then overlaying across that the livestock system which would best utilise it to achieve the production and also economic and profit benefits. Moving into the current CRC, we expanded that into looking at native pastures. So in those areas, how do we manage for the environmental outcomes of ground cover and biodiversity in those pastures, while at the same time achieving the economic returns that farmers need? And that came to, again, a case of looking at the whole system and saying, well, what times of the year can we strategically graze that, and understanding some of the biology, which Meredith is going to talk about, underpinning that, but also how do we integrate it with the rest of the farm, the improved perennials, say, on the rest of the farm, to achieve those profit benefits.
Yeah, okay, that's a fantastic snapshot, I think, of the entire EverGraze project and its objectives and how it's come good with it. Now, Kate, that's a big area of Southern Australia that we're talking about. How did you go about collecting research data and conducting research over such a big area?
Thanks, Bernie. There's actually a slide.
Yeah, it's coming. There's a bit of a delay.
Yeah, that's all right.
It has to go up to the satellite and back. Yeah.
Yep. So this slide actually basically demonstrates how the whole EverGraze model was fitted together. And so the EverGraze principle, you've heard it many, many times already. The right
Can't hear it too many times, Kate.
The right plant in the right place for the right purpose with the right management. Was underpinning the way that the systems were designed, as well as the way the systems or the EverGraze research was interpreted and the way it was delivered. So that's the first element. The second is pre-experimental modelling. So both at the catchment scale and the farm system scale, modelling was used to determine which set of perennial pasture species and in some cases annual pasture species could be put together with which livestock systems to design farm systems experiments. And the data was collected on the farm systems experiments, and as Michael said, we had both the native pasture systems and the improved pasture systems. So our native systems were at Tamworth, Chiltern, Orange and Holbrook, and our improved or high input systems were across Hamilton, Albany and Wagga. And on those systems, the data was collected over up to 9 years and then used to validate our post-experimental modelling. So data was fed into models such as grass growth and used to ask further questions such as what would happen over a broader range of climate scenarios. And then along the way, we had our EverGraze regional groups. So EverGraze regional groups were consisting of farmers and advisors, and they were critical right through the process in the design of the systems, how the systems were implemented, and then asking those post-experimental modelling questions. And then packaging all of that together, we had the component research feeding in. So we had things like, the new Tedera species. We had shelter research components that were new to the systems that could be fed into the modelling. And then lastly, that was all packaged together and delivered to farmers. And so we had a coordinated effort engaging a huge number of people, advisors and farmers, and developing training. And across Southern Australia.
That is one massive task. You've told us how you did it. What were the findings?
Well, the findings, I think the overarching message, is that we had evidence that when you put the perennial systems together with the livestock systems, the right management, we had the improved reproductive performance, a focus on meeting the requirements of soils, so fertility requirements, drawing efficiencies in soils, soil fertility and fertiliser, and then tactical management to manage those investments that have been made. You could actually achieve those dual profit and environmental outcomes. So the best example we have, because we have good benchmarks, is at Hamilton, where we were able to significantly increase the profitability by the 50% above the top 20% of farmers in that region. And then we had our evidence of individual practices. So you've got up on that slide there the feed-based livestock systems, the grazing management, the tactical management and soil fertility. So feed-based, summer active, the mix of summer active and winter active perennials were really important. So lucerne in the systems at Wagga and Hamilton was significantly able to reduce feeding costs in the dry years and significantly increase the profitability in the years where we had opportunities to finish lambs. At Albany, we were able to show that about a 25% a system with about 25% perennials in it was able to be the most profitable, and the amount of perennials actually increased in terms of optimum profitability as the rainfall decreased, because the perennials were able to lengthen the growing season. And the perennials in Albany, as Morgan's going to talk about, the kikuyu is pretty important for maintaining ground cover as well. With our investments in perennials, we estimate about a 6 year return on investment and about a 30% return on investment from perennials sown. Grazing management is really important in particularly our native systems, where we were able to show that rotational grazing was important for persistence of perennials that were sown, but perhaps not so important for systems based on microlina in the native systems. We found that maintaining a 70% ground cover or 80% ground cover level and an 800 kilo dry matter level was able to make perennials persist right across, and those microlina systems were actually able to persist under set stocking. However, Warwick Badgerite Orange found that you could actually increase profitability using rotational grazing through increased utilisation, but there was a limit to how much investment you could actually put in place. So about a 13% return on investment from rotational grazing. Livestock systems were really important for Wagga, and so Wagga showed that a lambing time of spring was significantly more profitable than a lambing time of winter, and if you had a split joining time, it actually reduced the variability in gross margins, so much less loss than a spring lambing system in those really dry years. At Holbrook, we showed that we were able to have a system that was ewe lamb based, much more profitable, rotating between Phalaris and native pastures compared to a system that had wethers dry stock grazing up on those native pastures. And in fact, on all of our native systems, a ewe lamb enterprise was able to be run profitably, mostly producing store lambs. And then finally, reproductive performance. Reproductive performance was a really important theme right throughout the EverGraze program. We had higher than average reproductive performance of sheep in all of our proof sites, but we particularly put in place a few common themes. So meeting condition score targets and feed on offer targets was important, following the lifetime wool principles, so bringing those principles into EverGraze, and then developing new practices. The work at Wagga Wagga looking at flushing ewes on lucerne increased lambs marked by 10%, and the work at Hamilton using hedgerows for shelter for lamb survival, increasing lamb survival by 30%. So return on investment on those practices, so $42 increase in gross margin from the flushing, and about a $5 per ewe mated return from the establishment of hedges. So there's some good numbers in there.
Some good numbers, and you didn't stumble on one of them. I didn't see a palm card. You're a little bit Rain Man today, but in a good way. I think it comes from, was it 14 years you've spent?
No, God
16?
no. I have to acknowledge Angela Avery actually led this project up until 3 years ago.
Right.
And I took over the leadership of it then,
Yeah.
but I have been involved for about 7 years.
Yeah, well, congratulations, and a really great synopsis of all of the outcomes, and certainly numbers there for anyone who really needs to know them, all available on the website as well, and with the regional packages. Now, let's get to some producers. Morgan, that shot where we saw you digging up the sandy soil with the organic matter growing through, it was worth 1,000 words, I think. It really, and you explained really well how you use the principles with your layering with the kikuyu and the legumes and grasses. How important, we keep hearing about these principles this morning, how important were the right management and right purpose for your enterprise principles for you in your produce, in your production?
Well, I guess I should start by saying we looked at EverGraze system, and part of that was the right place, right purpose, right management, and all of the above what we've been hearing.
So we can't hear very well. Can we hear that one up a bit? Thanks.
So, looking at the right purpose, firstly, where we farm, we've got very deep sand, a wind-prone environment, and only on 400 mil rainfall. So, in selecting the right plant, we needed a plant that would stabilise the soil with a deep root system, which would enable us to have out-of-season green feed. In choosing the right plant, I've actually visited a workshop run by Paul Sanford out of Albany, and he was talking about Kikuyu some many years ago, and it was having these attributes of the deep root system and sprawling runners and everything. I thought this is the right plant and could be the right answer. EverGraze actually showed us the tools, gave us the tools to look at our system, and in particular with the evidence-based research coming out of the Wellstead proof site, where we were showing different perennials growing on similar soil types to what I had at home. Kikuyu certainly shone out on the deep sand, so that was the right place. So once I established Kikuyu at home and found that it had a role as a foundation pasture, I started asking more questions. What else could we do? Could we plant crops into the Kikuyu? Could we grow our nitrogen cheaper than we could buy it? Was it profitable? These answers all needed to be done, so we thought about setting up a trial with our group, particularly Paul Sanford and Eric Dovey from Albany Ag Department, looking at sublethal rates of Kikuyu, sublethal rates of glyphosate on Kikuyu, and with the idea of sowing companion species. One of the things that we did was we grew field peas into the Kikuyu. All this time, our management, the right management, was evolving. Now, Paul also, with his work, identified that we had an issue with our weaner survival. So out of this, we trialled a crop of peas, as I suggested, and left them standing for the weaners to eat standing, and we ended up with 97% survival rate, which was the highest we'd achieved for some time. I feel with the EverGraze principles now that we can actually show the current and present farmers and future farmers to come that with the right tools, the right management, given via workshops and the EverGraze website in particular, we can show that we can be profitable and sustainable into the future. But above all, the biggest impact for me is where I once left footprints in the sand, they're now covered with grass.
Fantastic. That's great. I'll have to Google. That's just terrific. Is that an unusual response? Is that an unusual story from your trial farmers? No.
No, they're all like Morgan.
All upbeat, and they've all got those punchy little grabs at the end that any media here will be picking up on. You'll be on the night's news, I promise. Now, Chris, you're a farmer and a farm consultant, so you've seen plenty of research projects, in the offing over the years. What was different about EverGraze that gave you the confidence to adopt its research when you were managing your place, which is called something like Woomagama?
Yes. It's actually called Woomagama.
Exactly, something like Woomagama.
Yes. Which I understand is Aboriginal for good place for a party.
All right.
And, that's right. No.
Well, it does look nice.
Well, that's two questions probably, Bernie. One is what's different about EverGraze to the others, and how did it help me? So maybe I'll answer the first one first. I think EverGraze being a farm systems research project made it very different to the component ones that we were used to. So it's the first time we thought about putting it all together in the one place. Because it's quite easy to get a component, often single disciplinary, and you get that piece of technology and you put it into your farm, but it affects so many other things. So to have something, that made a big difference. I think the idea of working on natural resource management and productivity simultaneously was revolutionary. I'd been involved in benchmarking for many, many years, and I'll tell you a story. In our first ever think tank we had with EverGraze was in Sydney, and we filled the room with NRM experts and production benchmarking experts because we needed to describe outcomes and then put a system together. And we ran a hypothetical. It was fantastic. First time they'd ever been in a room together, really. So the hypothetical, the first question went to the benchmarking guru. If you could think of one thing that's the most important thing for driving profit, what would it be? And he said, people that drive high stocking rates. And then we said to the NRM guy, if you could think of one thing that destroys more farms in your environment than anything else, he said, driving high stocking rates. So we're off to a tough start here, and then we moulded it together to create a farming system. And I was lucky, well, lucky I'm not sure, but at Wamagama we felt that we valued our environmental capital very much. And we were imposing farming systems on the land that was destroying it. And we recognised that there's two parts of the business. One is the enterprise, which we drive really hard, and the other is the value of the property itself. And so we wanted to design a farming system where we could drive our productivity and make the farm worth more and more productive at the same time and not destroy it. And perennials was the answer. So it was a beautiful system.
And has it worked out financially for you?
Well, I tend not to, it's not my farm, so I don't prattle on about the finances, except to say that we increased our stocking rate from 15,000 DSE to 24,000 DSE with these systems, and the farm with deep-rooted perennials is a far better environmentally state than it was in the previous, our old set stocked annual pasture regime. Yeah, an enormous difference.
Fantastic outcome. That's terrific. Now, Meredith, getting on to some science, how did your research contribute to EverGraze, and how did it change your thinking about research and farming systems? Also, two questions, you'll notice. Yeah.
So good. Got my slide?
Yep, your slide
That's
will come.
your slide.
Oh.
That's my thing.
And your slide.
Yeah.
That's your slide.
Oh, that's my slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
How about, does
No,
this
no.
make you happier?
No, that's not my slide.
That's not your slide.
Sorry, I had it.
That's your slide.
Thanks, Bernie. As part of the CRC, I was a PhD student within the CRC, but also I was a site leader for the Chiltern Proof site. So my PhD, my title of my thesis for my PhD was population. The ecology of Microlenus dapoides in grazing systems.
You've written a couple of PhDs lately, so it's easy to understand the confusion.
Sorry. Microlenus dapoides is a native grass, and it's a native grass that exists in lots of this hill country, like in this picture behind me. And being a perennial, I think we've already heard this morning about the importance of perennials in our hill country systems. In my PhD, I looked at the key attributes of the population biology of Microlena. So to understand when it produced seed and how often it recruited plants. So I found that Microlena pastures were typically composed of plants that were long-lived and that seedling recruitment was quite a rare event. And I think being part of EverGraze, Chris mentioned that people do component research, and I suppose doing a PhD is really focused on that component research. But being part of EverGraze and working with the EverGraze team meant that that component fitted into the whole system research, and that component was translated into methods that actual farmers could use on farm to manage their Microlena pastures. So in terms of grazing management of those pasture systems. I think also the part of the second question is being a student within the CRC has given me great links with a number of people, right around Australia, and I hope in the future that I'll be able to work more with those people.
And I guess it's given you this basis of thinking not just of individual components, of always seeing it as part of a bigger system and how much more benefit there is from that. So that's a great legacy from CRCs in general, but this one in particular. Congratulations, Meredith. Just graduated in December last year. Dr. Meredith, thank you very much. And Kate, just finally to you, you've just written a report on the impact of EverGraze. Can you just give us a snapshot? Oh, hello, the main findings.
Yeah, Thanks, Bernie. That's why I've got all the numbers in my head, because I've just written that report. So basically, those are the key statements, what we can say about EverGraze. We've had a huge number of people that have been engaged. Both producers and service providers value our products. And so we've just done an online survey, and we've also, over the years, collected data on all of our activities, and in particular, talked to our regional groups, those that have been close to the project. And people value EverGraze products, particularly because they're systems focused. They can relate to them. They're regionally relevant, and they're independent, and they're obviously had the input from farmers as well as scientists. And so that's the kind of feedback that we've had. 465 service providers. Scott put up a different number. I've got a few numbers for the service providers. 465 service providers have increased capacity as a result of EverGraze. And 64 researchers. So we've just heard from Meredith. That's the kind of story. Researchers able to think in farming systems and understand farm systems to do their research. 4,400 producers changed over 960 hectares. You've already heard that figure from Scott.
960,000.
Sorry, 960,000 hectares. Yep. I think at one point we had 1 hectare in another slide that instead of 1 million hectares. Practice change is valued at $306 million. The reason we can calculate those figures is because we've actually collected a lot of the data from looking at the impact and those sorts of figures I reeled off to you just earlier. So that's just in grazing management, pastures, shelter and flushing ewes. There was further benefits from livestock systems and reproductive performance that we couldn't include in those figures because I can't calculate them. Estimated benefit cost of $33 million project investment, 9 to 1, and demonstrated benefits to those environmental factors that we've talked about. And collaborative benefits to state agencies, RDCs and NRM boards. So we've just been through pretty big focus for the last year in particular, looking at how EverGraze is going to be taken forward. And there's certainly a heap of evidence out there of the benefits to agencies from the collaboration, but also the willingness and the incorporation of EverGraze products into their existing services and for the future.
And that kind of connection, that kind of collaboration and networking never goes away. So that's something that's been built and is only going to help other projects and down the track. So fantastic outcomes there. It's time now to go to your questions. We've got some roving mics. The people with the roving mics can just wave their arms around. So please don't waste your time. If you've got a question, here's the panel, and we've got about 10 minutes or so while we're waiting to get to our first question. You've got one? Okay, quick. If you can just say where you've come from before you ask your question. Thank you.
Hi. Is this turned on?
It is now, yep.
Anna Carr from ABARES in the Department of Agriculture. Thanks very much, Bernie. I have a question that I've been sort of reading the beautiful produce brochure, and I've come across this fabulous quote from Alexander Pope: "Where grows it not? If vain our toil, we ought to blame the culture, not the soil." And I've heard significant numbers and fabulous facts and figures about what impact you've had, but I haven't heard anything about the culture or the community of the organisations, agencies, groups, families that you've worked with. I'd really appreciate hearing a bit more about that, because that will be a legacy that will last.
Chris?
Yeah. I've been on the National Advisory Committee. I was for the first 8 years, and it was really that team collaboration. The term collaboration just keeps coming through and through and through, and that's a great question. It's one of the really strong legacies from all areas. So I'll start with the National Advisory Committee, managed the stakeholders, the shareholders, and we found very, very quickly that the style of leadership that was required, it couldn't be a democracy because 3 be happy and 2 wouldn't be. So it was a collaborative environment where we could have really safe, tough questions, and that flowed right through the whole institution. The relationship between farmers and researchers has been staggering because of the nature of the pre-experimental modelling, and then the advisory groups linked to the scientists and the research stations meant that the farmers developed a relationship with the researchers and had ownership of the product all the way through, which means farmers trust it. They trust the information, and they're very aware of the fact that the questions come from the ground up as well as from the top down. So it's been a beautiful system that I think that adds a tremendous amount of value to it.
Terrific. And we've got a couple of questions that have come in from Twitter. Jean? It'll come on.
We've got a question here from Kay Broderick, Mindful KB, which is actually linked into another question that's come in from Lucinda Corrigan, who I believe is in the audience here as well. And it's around what is the particular key, or is there a particular key that has enabled practice change, especially when considering the keys for future investment in terms of enabling change in future investment? Michael, okay.
Okay, I'll have a crack at that. I think
maybe repeat the question or your understanding of it, because it was pretty quiet. Thanks.
My understanding of the question was, what are the key elements that have enabled the practice change? Is that basically it?
Moving forward for future investment, so taking the learnings perhaps from what's enabled practice change here for future investment?
Yeah, I think it's been touched on before a little bit by Chris and also by Kate. Evidence has been really important. Having that evidence has been really important to give people the confidence to adopt that in any particular change in their system, and also put it in the context of the farm systems and really interrogating what the results meant to a farm system. So Chris mentioned the regional advisory groups. They've been critical to really help the researchers understand what those results meant to a farm system. So it's not really just saying, oh, do this and the result will be this. It's do this, the result will be this, but you might need to recognise that this, and this will need to change in order to capture that benefit. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Can I just add to that?
Yes.
Just, one other thing that actually enables that to happen is the building of capacity of advisors and researchers as well, both to ask the right questions so that the research is actually going to be relevant in the first place, and also through the process of the research development and extension happening all at the same time and being farm systems focused, advisors actually get a much greater understanding of the farm systems and how to actually integrate practices into farm systems, as do producers. And so that process of RD&E and farm systems focus has been important because the practice change happens along the way.
Can I add to that again?
Yes, I want everyone to add to that.
Look,
Get
it's
your
a
statements
really
ready.
great question, an important thing. The circular nature of EverGraze, there's the modelling, the research, the adoption, which creates more questions, mean that the questions come from the farmers. So they own the questions and they're seeking the answers before the researchers, so they own it. So the adoption is quick. Yeah, and that
because it's meeting a need, an existing
need. Because it's meeting a need,
yeah.
and EverGraze is continually doing that circle of here's the new stuff, how we put it in the landscape, oh, we've created another question for you, goes around, comes back again. And it's just a brilliant model for that.
Yeah, it's like the good side of codependence.
Absolutely, and that's what it is. Where would we be without researchers? Where would researchers be without an audience?
Exactly, yeah. We do have a question here in the audience. Yes, thanks.
Yeah, David Hudson from the Pasture Improvement Initiative. Question to the panel. In 2012, MLA released a report that showed that in southern Australia, South and Western Australia, there was 50 million hectares of improved pasture, of which approximately 20%, or just over 15 million hectares, is in decline. The numbers you've got up there show that you've enabled practice change on nearly 1 million hectares. What has to happen from here to get to the rest of those hectares?
Is that why you moved to New Zealand, Kate? The too hard basket?
No, I think we've actually got a really good opportunity now. We've built a model and we've worked really hard to build that model, and it works. And so now it's a matter of actually expanding that to a whole lot of other different areas. I think there's an opportunity for a lot of those projects that are in this CRC to have regional packages just like we have in EverGraze. And to continue to build on the model that we've got. And like Chris explained it really well, that we've got the cyclical nature of asking questions. I think if you keep that going, you'll build capacity of all of the segments of the audience, and it should expand exponentially.
Can I just add, researchers don't want to forget to listen to the farmers, get so dedicated in the research they're doing, but really it's got to come from the ground up. It's very important.
To get that ownership.
To get the ownership.
Terrific.
Can I answer that too?
Yes.
A little bit more? Thanks, Bernie. Just a tiny bit from a profit-driven farmer perspective. We can tell the story in our case studies of many farmers that have reduced their cost of production by up to 30% per kilo of product when they start to get fertility right, pH right, perennial species right, grazing management right, and that's imperative as our costs increase.
Costs reduced by 30%.
That's what we experience and what lots of other case studies, yeah.
Terrific.
So that's a key driver, stocking rate, comes back to that same message.
Fantastic. I think we've got time for one more question, so if we've got one ready, was there one to go? No? Last chance? Okay, well then I've got one last question for Michael. What next for EverGraze?
Yeah, what next for EverGraze? Well, we've built, as Kate mentioned, the website, which we've got funding to continue for the next 12 months. So that's going to be a key legacy. But we're in discussions with, I mean, the main funders for this work over the life of it, cash funders, were MLA and AWY. So they're very keen to continue to talk with us about what we can do to ensure the legacy of the material and what next. So look, those discussions are happening at the moment, and we're, as Kate mentioned, we're very excited by the model that's been built, and we're confident that it's demonstrated, significant practice change and significant improvements in profit, and it's, I think, critical that we build on that to potentially expand to more regions and different environments.
And one last quick one for you, Kate. We've talked about the model, and you're saying, okay, so we've got the model now, and it's about further uptake of that. Has the model already covered all the kinds of rainfall and land and livestock? So it's more research as well as just getting it out there.
Yeah, I think it is, and certainly we've really only, EverGraze is the most mature project in the CRC, and so we've really only reached this level of the model with EverGraze. So I think you could apply it across the lower rainfall regions as well. But particularly with a focus, yes, on more research, but also formal training and capacity building of particularly advisors. There's a really big opportunity to target that segment of the audience, and what I've noticed in the later phase of the project is that, yeah, we've engaged a lot of these people, and I've said that we've got an increased capacity of 465 advisors, but there's a lot more scope now that we actually have the information there available and on that website. It's quite important.
And Morgan and Chris, do you think that increased capacity in advisors is going to be enough to meet the needs for getting more farmers on board?
I think the most important thing is train the trainers correctly.
Yeah.
Not just train the trainers, but train them correctly. To get the right adoption, you've got to have that enthusiasm and drive from the trainers, and that becomes infectious, and then you'll get the uptake.
Fantastic. Yeah, you've had enough extras today, Chris. That's enough for me. No, would you like to say something?
Yes, I would. I'd like to say that EverGraze was never designed to finish with the CRC. And so what we do from now will be really exciting and interesting. Yeah. And the CRC's left a fantastic legacy with the website, with a unique culture of behaviour and a quest for knowledge and a platform to build to get the adoption targets we talked about.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our panellists for